Today, we're going to unpack the story of a man you've probably never heard of, a guy named Fred Seaver. But his life, told in his own words, has this incredible lesson buried inside it that sometimes the absolute worst things that happen to us, well, they're the very things that lead to our greatest moments.
And this quote right here, this is the whole story in a nutshell. Fred said this when he was 71, looking back on everything. So it begs the question, right? What was the worst thing that happened to him? And how in the world could it possibly lead to the best thing?
To figure that out, we've got to go back, way back. We're talking Massachusetts in the 1930s, where a young Fred Seaver had his life all planned out. And honestly, it looked perfect. I mean, just look at this checklist for a dream life. The guy was a star athlete, baseball, football, basketball, you name it. He was good enough to get a football scholarship to Dartmouth, an Ivy League school. So he's got this amazing future ahead of him. He's in love with a woman named Mary, and he is ready to get started.
And then the whole thing just imploded. A football injury ends his career on the spot, forcing him to drop out of Dartmouth. But the real gut punch, the one that really knocked him down, was when he went to Mary's father to ask for her hand in marriage. The father just said no, a hard no. And why? Because of their religions. Fred was Episcopalian, Mary was Catholic. And just like that, poof, the future he had so carefully planned was gone.
So now he's 29 years old and his world is tiny. He's back in his hometown, his dreams are just dust, and he's working odd jobs trying to get by during the Depression. And in his own words, he was just heartbroken and felt like he was suffocating. He was completely and utterly stuck.
So he did something crazy, something drastic. In December of 1940, he hopped in his car and he just started driving west. No plan, no destination, just a desperate need to escape. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. This wasn't some fun summer road trip. We're talking 3,000 miles of open road, a journey fueled by nothing but a broken heart and this sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could start over. And get this. He did it in only 4 days. He told his sons later that he barely slept. He just kept his foot on the gas. He said, "If I stopped, I'd think. And if I thought, I'd feel. And I couldn't afford to feel right then." Wow. You know, his path was this iconic American journey. He took these old two-lane highways. This was way before the interstate system. He went from the snow and cold of Massachusetts, straight across the heartland on the famous Route 66, and finally down through the sun-baked deserts of Southern California. So when he finally pulled up to his aunt's house in San Diego, it wasn't just the country he'd crossed. He had crossed a line in his own life, leaving the old Fred Seaver behind him in the rearview mirror. And right here, at this absolute rock-bottom moment, after this frantic escape, this is where everything changes. This is the exact moment the worst thing that ever happened to him starts to turn into the very best.
A few months go by. He's living with his relatives, and one night at the dinner table, Fred just blurts this out. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't romantic, but it was brutally honest. The guy was lonely.
And in that moment, this one little cheerful sentence from his cousin Marcia completely rerouted his entire life. She just pipes up, "I know one." Turns out, she knew a teacher at her junior high school.
So, who was this girl? Her name was Betty Carringer, and get this, she was a college grad, had a great steady job as an art teacher, and seemed to have her entire life together. And then you have Fred, a 29-year-old college dropout with a broken heart crashing on his relative's couch. Talk about a contrast.
But you know what? It didn't matter. They clicked. And from that moment on, his life just took off like a rocket. They met in 41, they were married by 42, had their first kid in 43, and this was all while he was serving in the Navy during World War II. Slowly but surely, he was building an entirely new life from scratch.
So what did this new life actually look like? It wasn't the Ivy League dream he'd planned back east. Nope. It was something else entirely. Something quieter, but maybe a lot more real.
And this is the part that really matters. His new life wasn't about being famous or rich. He became an insurance agent, a father to 3 boys, a Little League coach for 15 years, a husband to Betty for 41 years. He wasn't the star athlete he thought he was going to be. He was something so much more important. He was a reliable, present guy who just showed up, day after day, for his family and for his community.
And that brings us right back to where we started. Because when Fred looked back on this quiet, steady, meaningful life, a life that was literally born out of total disaster, he was able to boil it all down to a few really powerful lessons.
I mean, these rules are basically a map of his entire story, right? He couldn't control getting injured or getting rejected, but he controlled his response. He got in the car. He totally embraced the detour. He showed up every single day as a husband and a dad. He accepted help from his cousin, and the big one, he took that massive risk and just started driving.
And this right here, this is the mic drop moment. He laid it out so clearly for his sons. His biggest heartbreak was the thing that had to happen for him to find his greatest joy. If he hadn't lost Mary, he never would have found Betty. His sons, his whole family, none of it would have ever existed.
And that was his own final judgment. He knew he wasn't going to be in any history books, but he also knew, deep down, that he'd built something that was real, something that mattered. A good life, a full life. He finished his story by telling his sons that when he drove west, he had no idea what he was looking for. But when that pretty art teacher named Betty showed up for dinner, he knew he had found it. And that, he said, made all the difference.
And so Fred's story leaves us with this one last thing to think about. What's the rejection, the failure, the heartbreak in your own life that, maybe with a little distance, you can see was the start of something better? What was your drive west?